Hello everybody, Ben Cohn here from The Banter. If you have not subscribed to the YouTube channel, please make sure you do so now. Click like, subscribe, make sure you get all the updates. This is where we go behind the headlines and try to uncover what's really going on in the news. And today I wanted to do a YouTube reaction video. This is the first one that I've done of these, so please bear with me while I try and figure this out as I go along. But I wanted to talk about the conversation between Cenk Uygur and Tucker Carlson. This happened last week. It was a very long interview, mostly on Israel, because Cenk and Tucker are both obsessed with Israel. And I wanted to go in depth and break down some of the stuff they've been saying and uncover basically the bullshit. Now, I want to make it clear that I do not regard myself as a fundamentally pro-Israel person. I support the country's right to exist. I think they were right in hitting Hamas after October 7th. I don't agree with the way in which they prosecuted the war, particularly Benjamin Netanyahu, who I think is a psychopath. I think that Netanyahu is one of the most dangerous politicians alive, and he's prolonged this war and killed tens of thousands of people unnecessarily to prolong his political career, to keep himself out of prison, because if he's out of office, he's likely to go to jail on corruption charges. So he's strung together this far-right coalition packed with absolute lunatics, and they've kept this war going with Hamas, who are basically non-existent now. Hamas doesn't really represent much of a threat to Israel anymore. So I don't really understand why the war needed to go on this long. So I'm not that person. Yes, I am of Jewish descent. You can tell by my name, Benjamin Cohen, but this doesn't automatically make me a Zionist or a pro-Israel person. Or we can get into the Zionism debate another time. I don't really understand why everybody's obsessed with Zionism, but most people really don't understand what it is. But again, we'll do another video on that at some point. Anyway, I wanted to talk about the video that the interview they did on Tucker Carlson's channel, which really, I think, shows the horseshoe theory in effect, right? That the far left and the far right are now so similar that they appear to be on the same page on most issues. Tucker and Cenk are now BFFs. I didn't think I'd ever see this. Cenk, I have never liked Cenk Uygur much. I've never liked his content. I think he's a blowhard. I think he is an ideologue. He's dedicated episodes on his channel to slagging off the banter. Care that much what he thinks of me or the banter. But yeah, I'm not a huge fan. But Tucker Carlson, this guy is dangerous. This guy is extremely dangerous. I think he's a virulent ethno-nationalist. I think he's a racist and an anti-Semite. And he pretends not to be. We're going to dig into the video on this in a bit. And I'll go a bit more in depth as to some of Tucker Carlson's history and why I think, he is one of the most dangerous people in US politics today. He's lent his voice to Donald Trump. He's ushered in basically a fascist government. And he's been a major cheerleader for that too. So anyway, without further ado, let's get into this video. I'm going to start playing it, then I'll react as they talk.
Why don't we do a poll? And I challenge CNN, New York Times, Gallup, anyone to do this poll. And if none of them accept the challenge, then we'll do the poll. We'll commission the poll, and then we'll see. And then they could verify it if they like. And the poll is, does America owe Israel any more money? Because every pundit on television say, we owe Israel. We owe Israel. They never explain why, right?
People really say that?
All the time. They say, okay, what do you mean, $300 billion? You owed Israel. Of course you should pay him $300 billion. Why did I pay them 21 or 31 billion in the middle of a genocide? You owe Israel. Why do I owe Israel? No one ever explains. No one ever explains.
I've never heard that. They actually say that out loud. We owe them?
Of course.
For what? Where's the debt from?
Yeah. And and when I press on every one of these talking points, that's part of why they despise me. Right. And I say, okay, help me understand that. Why would we owe Israel? Well, they suffered a Holocaust, the Jewish people. Well, first of all, the Jewish people did, not Israel, right? That's different. Okay,
I'm going to stop there. So this is absolute bullshit. Tucker Carlson says, I've never heard that, right? Why is he saying he's never heard that? Because it's never happened. Cenk is talking absolute nonsense. Everybody's made this claim, right? Politicians say we owe Israel. They don't. That's not the dominant policy justification used by US officials for supporting Israel. The real arguments usually center on regional military alliance strategy, intelligence cooperation, defense technology partnerships, maintaining US influence in the Middle East, and domestic political coalitions. This is a political talking point, right? This is a moral framing or a straw man argument, right? It's a classic straw man argument. And Tucker says, where's the debt from? And he doesn't know where the debt from because nobody ever says that at all. Okay, so now he talks about the Holocaust. People are saying that we owe Israel because of the Holocaust. So yeah, let's continue.
Okay, but wait, we rescued them from the Holocaust.
And all those Americans died. A lot of them, hundreds of thousands of Americans died fighting that war.
If we rescued them from the Holocaust, why do we owe them money? It's
Okay, let's dig into this. Americans died saving Jews, so why do we then owe them for the Holocaust? First of all, I've never seen anyone say we need to arm Israel because of the Holocaust. I've seen them say we need to send money to Israel because their neighbors keep attacking them. Again, I'm not justifying what Israel's done to Gaza. But there are a couple of myths here. America didn't enter World War II to save the Jews. Neither did Britain. They weren't doing it to save the Jews and prevent from the Holocaust. They actually knew what was happening. Right? A lot of historical records show that the Allies knew exactly what was happening and didn't do much to help the Jews initially. Right? They obviously were disgusted by what was going on, but they were unverified rumors at the time, and it didn't change the calculus as to whether to join the war. Right? America joined the war after the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, and the fact that Adolf Hitler declared war on the United States 4 days after that. Britain was about to collapse, and Roosevelt was deeply worried about Nazi-dominated Europe for a vast variety of reasons, right? So this is a massive straw man argument, not based on historical fact at all. Right, let's continue.
It's like none of these talking points make any sense. If you all you do is just prick the bubble, and people instantly go, "Oh, wait a minute."
Yeah, the talking points don't make any sense because nobody's making it. Nobody is making these arguments.
Lift the curtain. So here we rescued.
But they'll actually say that?
Yeah. So the Bosnians.
Yeah. Who, Cenk? Who's saying this? Who's making these comments? Please give me 2-3 people who've said this.
Right. For example, right. We rescued them from a genocide from the Serbs. Right. And I'm proud of that. And I think we did, we saved tons and tons of lives. And you can say, maybe we shouldn't have interfered. Maybe we should be more isolationist. It's a good debate, but at least we did something demonstrably good there. Okay. Did the Bosnians, after we rescued them from the genocide, come and to say to us, "You owe us"? No, they said, "Thank you." You, by the way, you won't find anyone on this planet who loves Americans more than Bosnians.
So this would be a great analogy if it was true, if it wasn't based on a straw man argument or a straw man theory, right? Using this as an analogy is great in Cenk's fictitious world where everybody's saying that we owe Israel because of the Holocaust, which nobody says. Anyway.
Okay. And so they love America. They appreciate America. Poland lost 5 million people in the Holocaust, 1.8 million non-Jews, 3 million Jews. So after the Holocaust, Poland could have said, "You owe us." No, we saved Poland. Russia saved Poland. We saved Jews. Russia saved Jews. By the way, did Russia ever get a thank you after losing, 20 million or so people in the war, right?
Okay, let's dig into this again. Russia, the Soviet Union, saved Jews and got no thanks. This is historically nonsense, right? Yes, the USSR did suffer massive World War II casualties, but the Soviet Union at the time was deeply anti-Semitic and did not enter World War II to save the Jews. It entered World War II because Germany invaded it, right? The Soviet regime was notorious for persecuting Jews, right? And they later did it after World War II. Many Soviet Jews were prevented from emigrating to Israel until late in the Cold War. The Soviets did not enter World War II to save the Jews. This is historical bullshit. And why should the Jews thank the Russians for that? Anyway, let's continue.
Right? Instead, now Israel's constantly attacking Russia. I got no love for Russia. I think Putin is wrong. I don't think he should have invaded Ukraine. But wait a minute. Why does anybody owe Israel for anything? It doesn't make any sense at all.
No, it doesn't.
Okay? So now they want a new memorandum of understanding. They were going to try to make it 20 years, and partly because of you and us and all the people that are going, wait, why? That a memorandum of understanding is the president saying, we owe you for the next 10 years, 20 years, etc.
And
this is not what a memorandum of understanding is. It's not, but we're going to get into that.
And that's an agreement between the United States and Israel.
Yes. So, for example, Obama signed a 10-year memorandum of understanding saying we owe Israel $3.8 billion every year for 10 years.
So no votes on it during that period.
The only votes you get is it gets put automatically into the budget every year. And once it gets put in, you have to actively take it out. But if you have to go to take it out, they'll call you an anti-Semite and try to ruin your career. I have amazing stories about that. Marie Newman, a U.S. Congresswoman, voted against one of the appropriations that Israel got. 4 Democratic colleagues come on the floor of the House and say, how dare you? How dare you vote against Israel? We're going to take away all your money.
Actually?
Yes, you could ask Marie Newman
When did
about it.
this
She said it
happen?
on the Young Turks. This happened just a couple of years ago. Okay, she was.
Okay, there's a couple of things to dig into here. First of all, let's dig into the Memorandum of Understanding. So Cenk is using the Memorandum of Understanding, the MOU, between the US and Israel to argue that America is financially locked into funding Israel in an automatic, undemocratic way because they owe them. This is not true. There's a partial truth here, right? MOUs do create long-term political expectations and make aid to Israel more stable and predictable, which can reduce public debate about the funding year to year. They function as a sort of strategic alliance planning tools that signal commitment, helps Israel plan defense spending, and provides consistency for US defense contractors and foreign policy planners. But he's completely exaggerating the power of MOUs by portraying them as sort of legally binding or forcing Congress to fund Israel regardless of political will. So in reality, MOUs are non-binding executive agreements that Congress can modify, reduce, or cancel at any time because it still controls federal spending. While pro-Israel lobbying and political pressure do influence policy, they do not automatically determine election outcomes or make aid untouchable. The more accurate view is that the US aid to Israel persists because successive Congresses and administrations have repeatedly chosen to maintain a long-standing strategic alliance. It's not because the US is contractually or secretly obligated to do so, and it certainly has nothing to do with them thinking they owe Israel, right? The US does not owe Israel in any legal, financial, or treaty-based sense, okay? So this is foreign policy spending. It's not debt repayment, reparations, or contractual obligations. The US government is not required to pay Israel because of the Holocaust, for past wars, or any historical event. Congress appropriates the money as part of defense and foreign aid budgets based on strategic, political, and alliance considerations, and it retains the legal authority to change or end that funding at any time, right? And it's not how the relationship actually works. But let's continue.
In Congress from Illinois, they said, we're going to take away all your money and we're going to spend a ton of money against you.
Her own party?
Yeah, her own party. And that's what happened. They spent about $4 million against her, eliminated.
No way.
Andy Levin, a Jewish American congressman from Michigan, kind of a legendary Jewish family in Michigan.
Yeah.
Carl Levin was a senator.
Yeah, Sander Levin, yeah.
Yeah. Andy Levin says two-state solution. He says, I love Israel. I'm a Zionist. Okay. But obviously we should have a free and independent Israel and a free and independent Palestine. $4 million against Andy Levin, eliminated.
No way.
Eliminated. Jamal Bowman, you think it was about the fire alarm? Right? You might be upset about the fire alarm or whatever else Jamal Bowman did. The Israeli lobby spent $19 million eliminating Jamal Bowman. Cori Bush, eliminated. Okay. Anyone who opposes Israel is eliminated.
Can I ask you a question? I mean,
So look, I want to chime in here. There's partial truths to what Cenk is saying here, right? I'm going to say this, that AIPAC and other Israel lobbying organizations do have too much influence on politics in America. We agree on that. But you could say that about a million different PACs. You know, the pharmaceutical companies that spend enormous sums shaping healthcare legislation, the defense industry that pours money into campaigns to protect weapons programs and military budgets. You've got oil and gas companies lobby aggressively on environmental and energy policy. Teachers' unions, tech giants, trial lawyers, and financial institutions all spend heavily to influence lawmakers. This is not unique to Israel policy. It's a structural feature of how money and lobbying operates in America. Okay, Saudi Arabia does it, the UAE does it, and the Qataris do it. And I don't see Tucker and Cenk railing against them. I wonder why. Anyway, let's keep going.
This is shocking, and I'll confess I don't follow the details of Democratic politics closely enough to have heard of any of this. I knew about Jamal Bowman, but the rest I didn't. So I wonder about that strategy, which they're now employing on the right and trying to left are, slandering people as Nazis or trying to get them killed, which they're doing. But I wonder, like, as a strategy, obviously it's immoral, but does it actually...
Trying to get them killed? Really? Who are those? Who's that, Tucker Carlson? Who? Okay. Just a flippant statement you put out there and leave it. Anyway.
But does it actually work? Isn't it better to say, as you would in any negotiation, like, here are the things I actually care about. Let's see if we can come to terms. Like, allow a little bit of flexibility. There's no flexibility allowed.
Well, Tucker, congrats. You have forced Israel into some flexibility almost single-handedly.
I don't feel that at all. I feel that because I've never been against Israel, and I'm not against Israel now. I'm not against any person, actually. And I'm certainly, as a Christian, totally opposed to hating a group based on its blood. That would include whites, blacks, Hispanics, Turks, and Jews. And I mean that. So whatever, I've really tried to be like, whoa, let's settle this down. It doesn't work. And I just wonder, that doesn't seem like a good strategy. I guess that's what I'm saying. Like, just...
I want to pick this up here about Tucker Carlson giving his best. Oh, really? Look, I didn't know about any of this, right? So he's not challenging Cenk on any of this stuff. He pretends he's to be surprised, right? This is to amplify the effect for his audience. So this is performance art and not journalism or serious political discussion. And also, Tucker, please stop pretending to be a Christian, right? He says this a lot now. You can see it in all of his interviews where Tucker Carlson pretends to be this meek and mild Christian. So this is Tucker Carlson's kind of conversion, right, or public-facing Christianity happened conveniently when Christian ethno-nationalism became popular in America, right? Carlson is the exact opposite of a Christian. He's a spiteful bully. He spreads destructive conspiracy theories on his show on a nightly basis. He helped elect a fascist madman with a long history of sexual assault, the guy who lies constantly, has zero compassion for anyone outside of his political bubble. Okay, this is a Christian. This is what a Christian would do. I don't think so. Anyway, let's keep going.
Saying, like, just as a negotiating position, it's like you have to have some willingness to move. You can't be that rigid or you're not going to win in the end.
Yeah. So the reason I said that is because, look, first let's distinguish. There's mainstream media purposely blends all these things together, partly because Israel wants to use Jewish Americans as human shields. They want to say, if you're attacking us, you're attacking Jewish Americans. And so you're not allowed to. You're not allowed to, right? But in reality, there's Jews as people / Jewish Americans. Then there's how you feel about Israel. Then there's how you feel about the Israeli government, right? We are talking about the current Israeli government. And they say, no, you're talking about Jews because they want to hide behind that, right? When we keep saying, no, not the Jews, and they're like, no, the Jews, we're like, stop saying the Jews. It's not the Jews.
Well, moreover, I get to define.
Okay, this is a problem here. The American Jews as shields, right? So I want to give a kind of a nuanced take here. So Cenk isn't completely wrong about this. You should be able to criticize Israel without being called an anti-Semite. Okay, I 100% agree with Cenk on this. The problem is it is impossible to separate the two. And that's because of people like Tucker Carlson and Cenk Uygur, who disguise their anti-Semitism with criticism of Israel. And to clarify, I don't think that Cenk hates Jews, right? I think he is unconsciously anti-Semitic, if that makes sense. And that's a lot of that is based on the amount of time he spends talking about Israel. Okay, Cenk is obsessed with Israel. Israel, and his co-host Anna Kasparyan, who we've done other videos on, is completely obsessed with Israel too. To the far left, Israel is a neo-colonial, racist, white supremacist, colonialist regime in the Middle East, and nothing else, no other country in the Middle East is as evil as Israel. You don't want to talk about the Saudis, you don't want to talk about Syria, about the Egyptians. No, Israel, right? There's a sort of laser-like focus on all the crimes that the Israeli government commits. And I'm here. I'm not defending Israel. I'm not here to defend the Israeli record on human rights, on the war in Gaza. That's not what I'm doing. I'm talking about what these people choose to spend their time analyzing and obsessing over. And it is Israel, always. And this is where I think the left falls prey to, this is the unconscious anti-Semitism, right? That to them, Israel represents a greater evil than, say, Hamas, right? Or the Islamic Brotherhood, or the jihadists, or the Taliban. So that to me is a very serious problem. You have there's a problem with your moral worldview if you think that Israel is worse than a lot of the other regimes, because they're just quantifiably not in any way. So that's why I think that Cenk has anti-Semitic biases that he's perhaps not aware of, and this is what happens on the far left. Tucker Carlson, that's another story, right? Anyway, let's keep rolling.
Find what I think and what I'm talking about, and let me repeat myself. I think anti-Semitism is immoral, and I won't engage in it ever, period. So I get to decide, because I'm a sovereign man, what I think, and I can try to express it as well as I can.
Tucker Carlson hates anti-Semitism. Is that right? That he doesn't engage in anti-Semitism? Is that right? Really? So let's consider the evidence, okay? Because I would say that Tucker Carlson, despite his protest that he won't engage in anti-Semitism, is actually an outright anti-Semite, and he can't be bothered to hide it anymore. So let's look at the evidence, right? First of all, he platformed Nick Fuentes, who self-identifies as a Nazi and a Jew hater, right? Why would you do this? Why would you give this guy, this gremlin, a platform? Okay, or just having a conversation. Second of all, okay, he called Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, who's Jewish, he said he's rat-like. This is a notorious stereotype for Jews. Exhibit number 3, right? He platforms Holocaust deniers and fake historians. I can't remember what the guy's name was, but he had a guy on for a long chat who basically minimized the atrocities of the Nazis and Hitler, said Britain was responsible for World War II. Why would you do that? Okay, he gave a eulogy at Charlie Kirk's funeral where he likened Kirk to Jesus, as one does, and then claimed that the people who killed him, were like a bunch of guys sitting around eating hummus, thinking about, what do we do about this guy telling the truth about us? We must make him stop talking. Who are you talking about there, Tucker Carlson? Yep, that's right. The Jews. I don't buy Tucker Carlson's I'm a Christian, I love everybody, I don't hate anybody at all. I think Tucker Carlson is a very, very dangerous character. He knows exactly what he's doing. He's highly aware of this. And he's found in Cenk an ally, right, to help him spread this worldview, this rabid anti-Israel nonsense, right, which is fueling anti-Semitism. I would love dearly to have a conversation, an intelligent conversation about Israel and about Netanyahu and the history of the conflict in the Middle East. This would be great. But these guys are not helping. They're not helping at all. And Tucker Carlson doesn't want to help. I actually think Cenk might actually want to help, right? I don't think Cenk is a bad person. Okay, I really don't. I think he's actually probably a decent guy behind all the bullshit and the bluster. So I think Cenk may actually believe that he's helping. I think he really does. But Tucker Carlson does not. Tucker Carlson is what you might call a trickster character. It's a kind of an archetype that exists across all sorts of indigenous wisdom traditions, right? These are these shape-shifting people who are obsessed only with themselves and with power and manipulation. And that's exactly what Tucker Carlson is. So if Tucker Carlson is talking about, trying to help, bring peace to the Middle East or stop wars, or he's a Christian, this is bullshit. This is a mask. This is a character that he's playing. It's a game he's playing. This conversation, I think, was deeply destructive. The fact that Tucker Carlson and Cenk Uygur now regard themselves as allies in this increasingly fractured political landscape, I think is a very scary development. Okay, what's next for Cenk? Is he going to invite Nick Fuentes on? What, because he's anti-Israel? Is that what's going to happen to the left? This is why I think a lot of Jews feel pretty afraid about what's happening right now. When you've got moderate people like myself who would like to talk about Israel and about the outsized influence perhaps that Israel has on US politics and biases you might see. But I am almost frightened to talk out about it because I don't want to add fuel to the anti-Semitism that is just gone absolutely bonkers in the past couple of years. I have never, ever seen anything like this. And as somebody who's of Jewish descent, this frightens me a lot. And it frightens me a lot when this kind of stuff goes into the mainstream, where Nick Fuentes gets platformed by people like Tucker Carlson, who was at one point, the most successful Fox News host in America. Okay. And now Tucker Carlson is hanging around with Alex Jones and, self-identified Nazis like Nick Fuentes. And now Cenk is platforming Tucker Carlson. So, I don't really know what a lot of this is about. Part of me thinks a lot of this is also just a naked grift. The fact that these guys both have very prominent YouTube channels and they can make a lot of money from spreading this kind of stuff. And they know that the anti-Israel stuff gets a lot of clicks. Why? Because there's a lot of anti-Semites who follow them. A lot of anti-Semites love this stuff. Keep talking about Israel, the algorithm rewards you. You make lots and lots and lots of money. So I think Tucker Carlson is that greedy and that cynical. I think he's spotted a good ruse here. I think he's seen he can make a lot of money out of this, right? He can rile up his followers, his ethno-nationalist followers by continuing to talk about Israel, even though it pisses off a lot of people in the Republican Party and probably Donald Trump too, right? Because Donald Trump is very, very pro-Israel. And that, which I would argue is a bad thing for Israel in the long term. I think Donald Trump is bad for Israel, just as I think Benjamin Netanyahu is terrible for Israel. But anyway, listen, I want to stop that there. I want to hear people's thoughts on this. Please leave comments below. If you leave anti-Semitic comments, which lots of people do, I'm going to block and delete them, and you'll be blocked from the channel. But if you have constructive comments, please leave them below. I would love to hear from you. And don't forget, subscribe and like to the Banter YouTube channel. Otherwise, we go down in the search rankings and the algorithm. We get punished by the algorithm. So make sure you like and subscribe. And yeah, we'll be back soon.